O rascal children of Gaza, you who constantly disturbed me with your screams under my window. You who filled every morning with rush and chaos. You who broke my vase and stole the lonely flower on my balcony. Come back and scream as you want and break all the vases, steal all the flowers. Come back. Just come back. Welcome to Words That Burn, the podcast taking a closer look at poetry. In 2024, at the time of recording, it's hard to believe that poems like O Rascal Children of Gaza by Khaled Juma are still so vital and accurate at portraying the genocide playing out in Palestine. It could have been written yesterday, and yet it was actually created over 10 years ago. Khaled Juma's haunting words on the eerie silence left behind by children who are no longer there were written in response to the Israeli state's military bombardment of Gaza, an event that would become known as Operation Protective Edge. In 2014, 3 Israeli teenagers went missing, assumed kidnapped. The terrorist organization, Hamas, would later claim responsibility for the action. In response to the action taken by a terrorist organization, the Israeli state and military responded with full force and enacted large-scale violence against the Palestinian people. The aftermath of that reaction was described by Amnesty International in the following way. It began just after 4 o'clock on a sunny Wednesday afternoon. 4 young boys, all cousins from the same family, were playing football on a Gaza beach. The shelling rained down, killing all 4 children. The Israeli military offensive, Operation Protective Edge, launched on the 8th of July 2014, killing and injuring scores of civilians. This deadly 7-week battle wreaked further havoc, punishment and devastation on Gaza's already blockaded population, with Gaza's children caught in the crossfire. Between July 8th and August 26th of 2014, the Israeli military killed 2,251 Palestinians during its assault on Gaza. Among those killed were 551 children and 299 women. At the time, this was recognized as the largest death toll resulting from Israeli military actions since the 1967 Nakba. Israel's activities in the Gaza Strip, West Bank and East Jerusalem resulted in the deaths of 2,314 Palestinians and 17,125 injuries, according to the annual report by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. It was also noted that this particular assault on the Palestinian people focused on violence against children. Khaled Juma wrote this poem in direct response to that violence against children. It may feel as though I'm burying you with figures on this particular episode, and that is not something that you would normally hear on Words That Burn. However, I'm doing so with a purpose. The figures are there to underline the devastation enacted against the Palestinian people. 10 years ago, they were absolutely horrific to the point of disbelief. And somehow, they pale in comparison to the latest figures from Gaza today. At the time of recording, August 2024, the fatalities and casualties for Palestinians stand at least 39,699 people killed. This includes more than 15,000 children. 91,722 people have been injured, and more than 10,000 are currently counted as missing. I've made this appeal a few times on the podcast now, as I've covered a fair few poems by Palestinian poets. But if you have any disposable income or spare money at the moment, please consider donating it to the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign. The IPSC is an Irish organisation that is working tirelessly to provide aid and assistance to both those fleeing and trapped in Rafah. The donation link to the organisation is below in the description. Even a little bit can go a long way to helping some people in a truly desperate situation. Poetry, especially Palestinian poetry, has always been a way to give form to feeling, to find that one perfect sequence of language that encapsulates what another is feeling, and hopefully strike that chord in another. In a nation so utterly dispossessed of its roots and history, combined with an active attempt to eradicate their culture by the Israeli state, poetry has always been a form of vocal resistance. The style of Palestinian poetry differs greatly from the Western canon, in that it has evolved to become very much a communal art form, and also incredibly direct. It has a great sense of urgency arising from the political circumstances of its evolution, and its deep entanglement with the personal. To be Palestinian is to be political. They have not had the luxury of being able to ignore politics for 57 years. That sense of urgency is on full display in this poem. For the purpose of analysis, I've split the poem into two parts. Though it's worth noting, as with much of Palestinian poetry, the focus of the work used is to emphasize emotion and appeal to others, as opposed to intricacy of language or clever literary devices. With regards to this poem, Khaled Juma has split the poem into two informal parts, which could be looked upon as the before and the after. The before is almost the recountings of a grumpy old man. O rascal children of Gaza, you who constantly disturbed me with your screams under my window, you who filled every morning with rush and chaos, you who broke my vase and stole the lonely flower on my balcony. Juma wastes no time in creating an idyllic, everyday scene, one that is filled with the innocent chaos that happy children leave in their wake. This is emphasized by the word rascal, a term that now feels a little outdated, but was once perfectly common when used to describe a child who was a bit of a mischief maker. The word itself has a much deeper origin from French, referring to those who are members of the masses, or the rabble. Regardless of its true origin, all the language Juma is employing in these opening lines is a testament to innocence. He is building a case that should anything awful happen here, it could never be justified. The next three lines of that first section kick off a refrain, where he describes the actions of those same children. Actions that once would have driven him to anger. The refrain he builds, each line beginning with you who, accomplishes two things. Firstly, it acts as foreshadowing, a hint of things to come. Words like screams, rush, chaos, broke, and stole are very context dependent here. They are, on their own, generally considered to be words with a negative connotation. But here, in the context of children playing, they should be harmless enough. Despite that, the refrain makes us as an audience just a little bit uncomfortable. Possibly because many of us reading or listening to this poem are already aware of the historical and contemporary context of what is occurring in Palestine. The refrain achieves a second thing as well. It places the poem firmly within the canon of Palestinian resistance poetry. As I've previously mentioned in the episode, Palestinian poetry has become synonymous with politics, particularly the politics of identity and resistance. The reasons for this are clear. The Palestinian people are currently faced with an enemy that wants nothing more than to erase them and their culture from the face of the earth. This has led to fierce resistance, both physically and mentally, but also culturally As a result of this cultural defiance, much of Palestinian art, especially contemporary Palestinian art, has refocused to assert both identity and resistance as its core themes. As academic Hanan Mikhail Ashrawi wrote, "Living under the occupation of a regime which is socially, culturally and politically alien and hostile to the native population has created a defense mechanism reaction among the Palestinians, who insist on preserving their identity at all costs." This is not dissimilar to the way in which Irish language art, or art oscuelga, was forced to undergo a similar reframing to preserve identity. The refrain as a literary device is used here and in countless other Palestinian resistance poems, some of which are linked below in the description. The refrain acts as an insistence, a declaration of permanence, of something that will not be erased. It also serves as an easy way in which a community could take up the call. This repetition and refrain has occasionally been criticised as something that has stripped Palestinian verse of its intricacy and complexity. However, I would argue that it is very much a case of form following function, and as such is vital in Palestinian poetry. Aside from such critiques wholly missing the point of asserting identity through poetry, they are also largely unfounded, as modern Palestinian poets like Najwan Darwish create beautiful layered works of verse that still stand as full acts of resistance. The first section of Khaled Juma's poem, Before, is a scene teeming with life. There is noise and action everywhere. This Palestine is filled with people living their lives. Its hustle and bustle makes the eerie silence of the next section, the after, all the more devastating. Come back, and scream as you want, and break all the vases, steal all the flowers. Come back, just come back. The poet appeals to the now missing children, beseeching them to return. The horrific silence has made him reconsider his previous impatience. He bargains with them futilely, telling them they can scream as much as they like, break whatever they want, steal as many flowers as he has. Unfortunately, it's too late, and all for nothing. Those final words, just come back, really underline the sense of desperation our poet is feeling. It must be the desperation that countless Palestinians feel as they are forced to undergo that most inconceivable of pains, the loss of a child. Khaled Juma has created a brief but devastating lament for Palestine's children in this poem. The final ellipses in the printed version of the poem, those 3 dots at the end, ensure that we, the reader, understand that this plea is left hanging there, impotent, like an echo in the ruins of a massacre. Khaled Juma's O Rascal Children of Gaza stands as a heart-wrenching testament to the devastating loss of innocent lives amidst the conflict in Palestine. The poem captures the stark contrast between the once vibrant, chaotic life of Gaza's children and the unbearable silence left in their absence. Through simple yet poignant language, Juma conveys a universal grief, making an impassioned plea to the return of what has been irreparably lost. As stated at the beginning of this episode, the poem was written in reaction to a horrific event known as Operation Protective Edge. This event happened 10 years ago, and yet the poem is, tragically, as relevant as it has ever been. This work not only serves as a powerful expression of personal sorrow, but also a broader lament for a nation perpetually scarred by violence. It compels the reader to confront the human cost of the ongoing tragedy. These are not statistics, these are not figures on a spreadsheet, but rather what once were living, breathing children. Juma's words leave an indelible mark that echoes long after the final words are read. As I explained at the beginning of the episode, the atrocities being committed against the Palestinian people are only increasing day by day, with no sign of stopping in sight. The survivors of this latest wave of anti-Palestinian military action undertaken by the IDF are now facing erasure and are in the midst of famine. I've placed a link in the description to donate to the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They are an excellent organisation that are working day and night to provide aid. As always, this is my interpretation, but I'd love to hear yours. If you'd like to get in touch with me or the podcast in general, there are a few ways to do so. You can reach me directly by email at wordsthatburnpodcast@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter or X at WordsThatBurn. I'm on Instagram at WordsThatBurnPodcast and TikTok at WordsThatBurn2. If you'd like to read the script of this week's podcast, complete with citations and sources, check the Substack link in the description. If you'd like to hear more Palestinian poetry from various poets from Palestine, you can check out the link to each episode below in the description. This episode was written and produced by me, Benjamin Colopy. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast once again, and hopefully you'll hear from me again soon.